Climate Lobby. Right, I guess I don't have to tell you the meeting's being recorded because we all heard that. So it's being presented and facilitated by the Citizens Climate Lobby and hosted by the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto, specifically by the Natural Resources Committee. Our co-hosts and this event are Actera and the Citizens Climate Lobby, Silicon Valley North and San Mateo chapters. We received additional publicity support from 350 Silicon Valley's Palo Alto climate team and from Cool Block Santa Clara County. My name is Hillary Glann, and I'm the co-chair of the Palo Alto League's Natural Resources Committee. And before we go any further, let me hand it back to John Keller, who's going to walk through a few housekeeping items for today's discussion.
Thanks, Hillary. I think most of you are familiar with this, but just in case there is anyone that's not familiar with all the functions we use typically in Zoom, if you're going to be speaking, you want to make sure to unmute yourself at the button at the lower left, or mute yourself when you're not speaking so we don't have any background noise, especially when we are not showing any slides. You'll want to use the gallery view selection at the top right. And another important feature that we'll use is the chat. We'll be trying to collect any questions and issues that you come up with for us that you'd like to input to the discussion in the chat. Thank you very much. And with that, I'll return to Hillary.
Great, thank you, John. So today we're going to work hard not to talk at you, but to instead have a conversation with you about carbon pricing and policy options. After we hear briefly from our policy experts, Julie Godin, waving, and Irene Yang, also waving. They're both from the Citizens Climate Lobby. We're going to tap into the wisdom and thoughtfulness of all of our attendees. We're going to split into smaller groups to figure out how to make carbon fees and dividends a successful component of our overall strategy to fight climate change. So let me introduce the rest of the team and then we'll jump right in. You've met John as well as Irene and Julie. The rest of the band includes Dave Kane, who is our lead organizer of today's event and the leader of grassroots organizing at CCL. Lauren Weston, the executive director of Actera. Virginia Van Kuren, who is also from the Palo Alto League of Women Voters Natural Resources Committee, as well as part of it, supporters of Actera and CCL, and Melise Lieb from the CCL endorsement. And so with that, let me hand it off to Irene.
Thank you, Hillary, for your awesome introduction and your wonderful words. So, hi, I'm Irene. I was waving previously, I'm waving now. So, and I'm really glad you could all join us here today. And as Hillary said, we are not just here to talk at you for an hour. We're here to start a dialogue to understand what we all think should be done about climate change. So I'm going to get things started with a quick poll. It's going to pop right up real quick. It's going to be, where do we all stand on climate change right now? Okay, results are coming in. Nice. All right, why don't we stop the poll now and share the results. All right, that's pretty much what I expected. Most of us are alarmed. Actually, more of us are alarmed than I thought. That's why I'm glad you're all here. And you know what? You are not really alone. A 2019 climate study by Yale showed that over 70% of Americans are concerned to alarmed about climate change. And I'm sure you all have noticed it. It really does feel like people everywhere are waking up to the idea that the Earth is kind of hot, huh? We should maybe do something about this. And from talking to longtime climate advocates like Dave and Hillary, it does seem like it's been a long uphill climb for a long time. But now, with largely changing attitudes and a renewed interest in civic action, there is hope. And I feel that hope very deeply because for a long time, I wasn't skeptical, I was just clueless. So I was born and raised in Houston, Texas, i.e. the oil and gas capital of the US. When most people hear that, they think that my childhood looked something like this, riding my horse to school through the desert. But in reality, Houston is built on a giant swamp, and this was my every summer growing up, playing in the flooded streets outside my house. Of course, I was just a kid, so I didn't understand why my parents got so worried every hurricane season, or how people were losing their homes to thousand-year floods. And I didn't know that swimming outside of the window of a car wasn't a teenage rite of passage. And over time, I became more and more aware of climate change and the effect that we all have on this planet. So I became more personally responsible. I ride my bike to work, I recycle literally everything. I gave up meat, delicious, delicious meat. And, I still believe that individual actions are the cornerstones of real change. But part of me started thinking, is that enough? These are pictures of climate protests all around the world in 2019. People everywhere are demanding action on climate change. And it's all thanks to these voices rising up in protest that climate change is actually being seen as a serious public policy issue right now. So I first heard about the idea of carbon pricing on a podcast, and it just clicked with me. All of us here can agree on the negative effects of carbon pollution, smog, flooding, this. So we're all paying the price with our health and livelihoods for carbon pollution. But so why not capture those negative externalities in money? Carbon pricing curbs carbon pollution by putting a real dollar cost on the negative effects of climate change we all feel already. Price all the gas, the crude, the oil sands, all of that, right at the source of extraction. It's a simple idea. Basically, make carbon cost more and people use less of it. It's an economic idea not only supported by thousands of economists and politicians globally, including our own Secretary of Treasury, but also the US Chamber of Commerce, Exxon, and even the Audubon Society. But mostly it's an idea that can be simply understood by people like me who don't happen to be Nobel laureate economists. And that can go a long way in gaining public support. Moreover, countries around the world, such as Canada, have already implemented some form of carbon pricing. Actually, that first podcast I listened to was about Canada's successful carbon fee policy. So carbon fee is just one part of the solution. I would say the second and actually more important part is what to do with the revenue. Any policy in the US can't just be effective. It also has to be well accepted by the people. There are in fact 4 bills in Congress right now proposing some form of carbon pricing, which you'll actually be hearing about very soon from Julie, who has a couple ideas about what to do with the revenue. Julie?
Yeah, thanks, Irene. Hi, everyone. So, as Irene showed us, a carbon tax is one of the best tools we have at our disposal today to curb quickly and efficiently our emissions and to meet the US carbon neutrality target by 2050. However, to be implemented successfully, it needs the buy-in from all the taxpayers in the US. We do not want to trigger a nationwide protest. So I pay taxes in the US, but as you may be able to tell from my accent, I'm also French. And I was in France in 2018, 2019, when the Yellow Vest movement happened. And it was basically a protest which happened in France and paralyzed the country because a carbon tax deemed unfair was proposed with no transparency over how funds collected would be used. So what do we do with the revenue of this tax? This is where we'd like to pick your brain. I'm going to walk you through 6 different options. After that, we will go into breakout room and we will discuss together. And then we will run 2 polls. The first one would be to collect your personal preference when it comes to what should we do with the revenue of this carbon tax. And the second one will be to know which option you think would ensure buy-in from the public opinion. So let's get started on the options. And while I present the options, please feel free as a primer to the breakout rooms to put in the chat what you think of each option. So onwards to our first option. The first option consists of funding clean energy innovation. So drive the adoption of renewable energy, energy storage, carbon capture technologies. One of the positive outcomes about funding clean energy innovation is that both progressives and conservatives like it. So there's a good chance it will gain support in Congress. And actually, there's a bill that will do just that. And it's called the American Clean Future Fund Act. But on the other hand, it's uncertain whether innovation will protect the poor and marginalized from rising energy costs. And this was precisely the issue in France that helped spawn the Gilets jaunes protest. So moving on to the second option. The second option is about investing in green infrastructures. So we've heard a lot recently about infrastructures in the news. And so this option would provide a way to pay for these investments and accelerate our transition to clean energy. Congress is currently working to pass a massive infrastructure package. And so what we mean by infrastructure would be investments in roads, bridges, airports, urban infrastructures. And so climate activists are working to ensure that as much of this infrastructure investment is actually green. But we may be wondering, like, what is actually green? We don't want to have greenwashing happening, and we wouldn't want this to lead to abuse and ultimately erode public support for this option. There is also currently a bill in Congress which supports investing in infrastructure, which is actually supported by both Democrats and Republicans, and it's called the Market Choice Act. Moving on to our third option. Our third option is about remedying environmental and climate injustice. So climate change is impacting the poor and marginalized way more harshly than anyone else in our society. And so this option would prioritize using the proceeds of the tax to improve their lives and safeguarding them. So of course, this option would have powerful support from environmentalists and from the left wing of the Democratic Party. But others argue that pricing carbon by itself already addresses this problem at the root cause by getting rid of fossil fuels. So the good news is that, like for the two previous options mentioned, we have a carbon pricing bill in Congress which targets specifically environmental and climate injustice, and it is called the Save Our Future Act. The fourth option would be about using the proceeds to pay a part of the public debt. So today, the US public debt stands at $28 trillion, which is huge, and which represents $250,000 per US household, which is being passed on to our children and grandchildren. So it's in terms of gaining traction in Congress, it's a bit difficult because the majority of the Republican Party doesn't make initiative to curb climate change their priority. So they are currently not really pushing in Congress for this option. However, there is a good chance that Congress will act anyway, because Democrats pushing the massive infrastructure and family support package through a sharply divided Congress are using budget reconciliation. And so there's a chance they will use a carbon tax to pay for it. The fifth option would be to reduce personal and corporate taxes, which would make this carbon tax revenue neutral. And so like paying down the debt, this option should appeal to traditional conservatives because it's revenue neutral. So it doesn't grow government. But like the previous option on public debt, it's not viable with the majority of the Republican Party not yet supporting initiatives to counter climate change. This, however, has begun to change because some Republicans now want a seat at the tables of climate negotiations. And so, for instance, in June 2021, 56 Republican representatives joined the newly formed Conservative Climate Caucus, which is a group aimed at educating fellow Republicans on climate change and aimed at pushing forward solutions that reduce carbon emissions while being aligned with the interest of the business community. And so this is an encouraging sign, and we may see a jailbreak from enough Republican politicians to support this option, which is called a tax swap. What we don't know yet is how soon enough could this happen. And finally, the sixth option would be to return monthly dividend checks to each citizen. So in this option, the government doesn't keep any of the money. It gives back everything to the taxpayers. And so it would divide up the revenues and send out equal monthly dividend checks to each person paying taxes in the US. And in this way, everyone becomes a shareholder in fixing the climate. Lower and middle income Americans would be unaffected by rising fossil fuel prices, or would even come out ahead financially. And so one of the arguments in favor of this option is that it's politically sustainable over this long term and probably over decades. And this is because once the checks start arriving and money goes into people's pockets, well, politicians will meddle with this cashback provision at their political peril. So there is also a bill in Congress which currently supports this option, and it is called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, with 76 co-sponsors, for the moment, all Democrats. So to be fully transparent, I am from Citizen Climate Lobby, and this is the option that we officially support. So the reason for that is we believe it would make this policy affordable to everyone in the US by putting money back in this pocket. So before we go into breakouts, a last point about why does all of this matter? So we're going to show you what happens if any of those 4 bills that Irene and I mentioned are passed into law. So as we can see on the graph, the results are dramatic. The cut in net emission is huge, by 50%. And I'm sure that since most of you are alarmed by climate change, I'm sure that you're already trying to do a lot to minimize your personal carbon footprint. But however, personal action represents like 25% of the footprint of an individual. If we want to try to reduce it more, we need a systematic change. And so this is where there's nothing more impactful you can do than helping to push this carbon pricing through Congress. Quickly, a few background information about how was this graph made. So these curves were developed using the open source energy policy simulator tool. And there are several other independent studies that show the same powerful effect of carbon pricing and this drastic reduction by 50%. So we can see those 4 curves, one for each bill. We don't have yet a simulation for options 4 and 5 because no bills have been proposed so far in Congress. Well, we'd love to have them, but you can be assured that they would have the same effect on the downward trajectory of carbon emission. But now the burning question is, what option do you prefer? And which option is going to resonate with the American public so it gets passed into law? And that's what you'll have an opportunity to discuss in the breakout room. A few indication about the breakout room. So it will be 15 minutes long. After we get back, you will take 2 anonymous polls. The first one will be about what option you personally prefer. And the second one will be which option you believe will gain broad support from the taxpayers in the US. And here, you don't need to agree with your group. You just need to debate, but you're totally entitled to your own opinion in the poll. And now I'll hand it over to John for a few information about breakout room.
Okay, thank you very much, Julie. So we'll be going into breakout rooms right away. And what you'll see is you'll see a pop-up and you'll want to enter the breakout room when you get when you're prompted by that pop-up. And then each of the breakout rooms has a facilitator that's been placed in that room, and they'll help organize the discussion. Thanks very much, and good luck. Irene, are you
Hey, John.
not in a breakout room?
You did assign me to room 3, but I don't know if I'm supposed to be in there to discuss, or
Okay. Okay.
I'm okay just hanging out here with you,
Okay.
you and Becky.
All right.
Should
Becky, are
we
you
turn
there?
off recording for this? Or should we pause this?
Sorry. Thanks everyone for taking part into to the breakout room. I had very interesting discussion in my breakout room. Does any of you want to come forward and maybe quickly sum up the exchange of what happened in their breakout?
I could talk about ours. We just feel like many of those options are equally important, and it's going to be really hard to pick one. Innovation, infrastructure, impacted communities, in particular, received a lot of positive feedback in terms of their importance. So it's going to be hard for this particular group to pick one to vote for in the poll.
Oh, that's interesting. Diversified view. That's awesome. Dave, do you want to add something? Oh, you're muted.
So I want to echo some of the things Virginia said for our group. There was a strong preference that was expressed for climate justice, environmental justice, and I think that we see that in a lot of our outreach activities in our local communities. But on the other hand, I think there was an appreciation for the fact that these choices are important, and there was support for the dividend option. There was also a lot of support for infrastructure, and I guess some of the conversation then turned to the effect of the carbon price, or some people call a carbon tax, on really encouraging innovation, and also the carbon price by itself helping to bring about a green energy infrastructure. It's a great conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Hilary.
Just very briefly, we had a very good chat, and we were very lucky to have Janet Cox, who leads the legislative outreach for 350 Silicon Valley in our group. So we got to learn about a lot of interesting stuff going on in the state of California and different bills. And so we in addition to talking about this, we had kind of a broad view of what's going on legislatively, at least at the California level, to take down our consumption of fossil fuels. So, and Janet has just posted in the chat that there is a hearing today at 1 o'clock talking about basically climate justice. So if those of you roll out of here and want to learn more, that link is in the chat.
Awesome. Well, I can talk briefly on behalf of my breakout. So, well, we all agree that the option of returning dividends to all citizens equally was the best. So maybe less discussions in here, but honestly, it was super interesting because the reason why we mostly agreed on the last option was that we all share equally the air we breathe. So we would need like a sort of like fair option for everyone contributing and receiving the same in addition, something that calmed down my fear of like a yellow vest reenactment was that I learned that if you implement this tax, the price of gas may not shoot up. It will only go up gradually. So it will not impact too much people who rely heavily on gas to go around or go to their work. So we also had really nice discussions, and we tried to talk about turn this fee into tax reduction to gain even more support, maybe from the Republican side, but we didn't find a way. Yes, Melis, go ahead.
Okay, so our group started discussing, we did not like the idea of innovation and infrastructure. I mean, in theory, we liked it, but in terms of the government being able to pick winners and losers, which they haven't done in the past. In fact, in California, we have an innovation program called PACE, and that has been mostly a failure. And similar problems with the green infrastructure. We talked about about justice, and there was a big support for that. And then there was a comment that the dividend program, in fact, helps a lot of the underserved communities, like where we are in Oakland, the communities in Oakland that are close to the refineries would be really, the dividend program is really progressive in helping them, because traditionally these families, they ride the bus, they don't use a lot of resources, so they would end up coming out ahead with the dividend program.
Oh, wow. Nice. I didn't know about this program in California. Lauren, do you want to share what happened in your breakout?
Sure. So for breakout room 5, we also didn't have consensus. We did have a great discussion around what our thoughts were on the different options. And it was ranging from, we need R&D, to maybe a hybrid model could work, to the modeling of a rebate is really attractive and motivating. So we were pretty spread through the options, but the conversation was very fruitful. And I think people came to the breakout room expecting to go through the options and share their opinions, as wide ranging as they were. I think the consensus is that everyone wants to see positive change and to save the planet.
That's very good intentions. A nice start. So thanks everyone for sharing. It seems that we all had a great discussion and learned a lot. Thank you to all for sharing what you think. It's super enriching for us to learn. And so now we can get started on our first poll on personal preference. And based on this discussion, I expect to see a lot of different answers. I'm excited. Okay, so
Why don't we cut it off at this point then?
yeah. Thanks, John.
We're number 1.
Yeah, it seems that option 6 garnered the more view, but only at 56%. So it shows that we the second option is remedying environmental and climate injustice in a tie actually with green infrastructure. So it seems that people are really we are all really sensitive to the topic of fairness and equality, be it by all getting the same check and all being the same stakeholder of the climate, or making sure that we protect the person which are the most impacted by climate. So that's interesting. And no one is about paying down public debt or reducing personal corporate taxes. That's also interesting. Awesome. But the question now is, do you think that this option would still garner the sick and secure public buy-in? So maybe we can move on to the second poll to find out about that.
Okay, we have about 70% of people have voted so far. We get our last couple of votes.
So it's still a tremendous support, even more actually, for returning monthly dividend checks to each citizen, which is very interesting because it shows that people think that maybe once the checks start flowing, indeed, it would be very difficult to repel this act, or maybe we think that it's the fair options to get everyone engaged in climate. But then I guess one question pending still is, why don't we have a bipartisan support yet if we think that this option is the one that will gather the most most support? So I guess it's up to us now to make it happen and to have a bipartisan support and everything. So maybe we can compare the results of the two polls. I don't know if I really want to screen share again. Or
I don't have that quite
okay.
ready.
Are you looking?
Yeah.
Let me check. Okay, got it. Let me share my screen. Oops.
We've clearly got some Zoom innovation going on here.
Oh yeah. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, this is because we have a live updates on what you think. So okay, so it seems that in terms of personal preferences, the top options are the monthly dividend checks, followed by as a tie with the green infrastructure and remedying environmental and climate injustice. And those are actually still those three options that you think would secure public buy-in. So that's interesting. It's I mean, first, thank you all for participating and giving your opinion. So what we have done today is gather together as a community or different opinions and then build the framework for a consensus. That's super enriching for us. And so despite the different options and opinions on what we could do with the fee, we think that carbon pricing is really fundamental to what we're considering here today. But indeed, the right option is also fundamental to secure public buy-in, because without public buy-in, we won't have this bill passed into Congress and we won't have the carbon pricing to put us on the right track to get to carbon neutrality by 2050. So before looking into what we can do to make this happen and turn this bill into a reality, I want first to thank you again for sharing your opinions in the breakout and then in the poll. This is really cutting edge civic engagement. And so we are very happy to have you interact with us and not only us present. That's great. And we really hope that we can take the next step together toward action. And so speaking about action, I'm going to turn this over to Irene, who will talk about what you can do to make this bill happen.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you everybody for sharing your opinions. I think it's awesome that we all talk about this together and we all have a policy that we all personally like. Maybe not the same exact policy, but I think we can all agree that Congress needs to do something about climate change. So, what now? Call your representatives. Okay. So call your representatives, let them know that you have an opinion and that you need something to be done. My congressman is Ro Khanna. I actually have him on the line right now, or at least his voicemail box. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to let them know exactly what you think.
Check our website for more information at khanna.house.gov. Thank you. We appreciate hearing from and serving California's 17th Congressional District. Record your message after the tone. When you've finished, you can hang up or press 1 for more options.
Hi, Congressman Khanna. I'm Irene Yang, a constituent in your district. Thank you for all the work you've done in the field of social and criminal justice reform these past 2 years. However, I urge you to take stronger action on climate change. I'm asking you to support carbon pricing as a policy to get the US to carbon neutrality by 2050. Thank you. Done. Wasn't that so easy? It was much faster than typing some comment on Facebook to your person who doesn't believe in climate change. So please let your elected officials know that you have hope and there is a path to carbon neutrality, whatever way you think is right. All right, I'll pass this on to Hillary.
So in addition to being part of the League of Women Voters, I'm also part of the 350 Silicon Valley Palo Alto climate team. And from our mission really is to mobilize residents of Santa Clara and San Mateo counties for a speedy and just transition away from fossil fuels. And obviously funding this mobilization would be great if we could figure out how to do that with a fee and dividend plan. In the immediate term, I would like to encourage all of you to join our Switch to Electric community engagement and education campaign that we are launching this summer in Palo Alto. We have volunteers, literally, not figuratively, from age 15 to 80, and we welcome all comers, that too. And if you aren't in Palo Alto, you can still join us and figure out how to leverage the activities into your community. So if you are interested, please contact us at, maybe someone can also type this into the chat, Palo Alto at 350siliconvalley.org. That's Palo Alto at 350siliconvalley.org. We're currently highlighted on your screen. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for the opportunity to participate, to lead a breakout room. I am Lauren Weston, the Executive Director of Actera Action for a Healthy Planet. We are in our 52nd year of providing programming to the Bay Area. Our mission is to bring people together to create local solutions for a healthy planet. This is a perfect example of that, bringing all of you together to discuss something that's really much needed and much necessary for all of us to succeed and thrive. My call to action for you is to just engage, whatever that looks like for you. We offer a ton of programming at Actera, from food to workplace sustainability to mentoring youth in climate action and providing them hope for actions that they can take in their own communities, to beneficial electrification for all. So check us out, actera.org. Also check out all these other amazing organizations. There's tons of ways to engage. I love that Irene made that phone call, because we also do phone calls. We want to be active participants, and changing hearts and minds means we also need to not only work with residents, but legislators that help promote those changes. So thank you all for the time, and please visit our website. I'll put in the chat.
And I get to clean up on this with the final word from the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto. And as you know, what the League stands for is civic engagement. And yay, Irene, for showing everyone how easily it can be done. We really encourage residents to learn about climate plans in their local community, such as the Sustainability and Carbon Action Plan, which is currently under review in Palo Alto, as well as what's happening at the state level. And I know that national action is super important, but we may make a lot more progress here locally, either at the city or state level. That's certainly what Catherine Hayhoe, the atmospheric scientist that many of you know of, really stresses the importance of local engagement. The League works through, can work at the city, county, state, or national issues to advocate for more climate legislation and action. And there are League chapters throughout the Bay Area. If you are interested, you don't have to be a woman to join the League of Women Voters. We have broadened our definition, I guess, since 100 years ago. So you can contact the Palo Alto League at, which is currently on your screen, at lwvaoffice@gmail.com, or you can go to the mylwv.org/California/Bay Area to figure out where your local league is. But yes, just to bookend where Irene started and where we're finishing now, getting engaged, making a difference from a civic perspective is going to be a key action for us to take to start driving some systemic change. I think I'm done. So thank you very much for joining us today. I think we had some very lively discussions and very much appreciate everyone's contributions. We have a very active chat, and I hope someone will save that, because I think there's some great resources that we can save and send out to anyone who's interested in that. And I believe, Dave, that I'm going to hand it off to you for what happens next?
Well, we are very interested in getting feedback from all of you. And as you can see here, we sometimes call this an electronic leave behind, but it's something you can do if there's a link in the chat. It's how we can improve, and also points of engagement that come out of our meeting today. So I really have appreciated seeing the participation by all of you in the breakouts, and thanks to all the speakers. I think you did a terrific job. And what we would like to do, if you don't have to go back to work and you have some time and you want to just talk about anything related to climate policy and what you heard today, we're just going to be here. And so please feel welcome to come in and talk more. And if there's something that we didn't answer, we will try to answer in more detail or do some research and get back with you. Thank you so much. Okay.
Great program. Thanks for putting it on.